All right, so let's move on tonight to another part of our show. And I found this article, Greenland's glaciers grows alarming the climate hysterics. Now, this article is proof of how mainstream media, they like to tell you the partial truth. They don't tell you the entire truth. They don't tell you both sides, especially if it's not in their agenda, if it's not something that's going to support their agenda. As you know, this article mentions the thaw that we saw in July 8th of 2012, I believe. And this event began on July 8th, lasted for 4 days before refreezing. A NASA ice scientist, Tom Wagner, observed you literally had this wave of warm air wash over the Greenland ice sheet and melt it. And to make it exciting, this was more exciting because this happened only a few days after a giant iceberg broke off from the Petermann Glacier in northern Greenland during its warm NAO phase. And I want to add as well, based on Summit Station ice core records, this occurs about every 150 years, according to Laura Cohen, a glaciologist from NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland. With this last one happening in 1889, this event is right on time. The key here, guys, is that this warm phase that happened, that melted parts of the Greenland ice sheet, was during the warm phase of the NAO. And now we are in the cold phase of it, and we are experiencing record growth of the Greenland ice sheet. In fact, we thought, or not we, but others thought, that we were going to continue to see this trend that we've seen over the last 20 years of melting. But the NAO, the North Atlantic Oscillation changes every 20 to 30 years. And so we've seen this periodic ice mass loss over the last 20 years and has produced about 10% of the country's icebergs. Now, the study published from last month in the Journal of Nature reported that the imagery, they use airborne and satellite imagery to show that since 2016, the Jacobshaven had been re-advancing slowly and thickening. And we link these current changes to the cooling in ocean waters in Disco Bay that spill over into the Elucid iceberg. Ocean temperatures in the bay's upper 250 meters have cooled to levels not seen since the mid-1980s. So, proof that we are witnessing a shift in the phase of the NAO, and just more proof too that mainstream media, when they talk about melting, it's like they talk about a heat wave in the middle of July in Georgia. Of course, you're going to have a super heat wave in July in Georgia. Just like you would have melt during a warm phase. And cooling will create more ice and growth of these ice sheets, which is what's happening right now, colossal amounts. And of course, CNN's headline is, Greenland's most critical glacier is suddenly gaining ice, but that might not be a good thing. Of course not. Anyway, we'll leave the link in the description, let you guys finish it off. Interesting article caught my eye this morning as I was drinking my coffee. I thought I'd share that with you guys as well. And some other interesting information today. Power stock, Chicago University proves unreliable wind and solar send prices soaring. This is another article talking about the Chicago study. I think I briefly mentioned adding chaotically intermittent wind and solar to your grid is a guarantee of rocketing power prices. The battle between the big three wind and solar superpowers, South Australia, Germany, and Denmark, is all about to whether it's South Australians, Germans, or Danes who get to suffer the world's highest power prices. The current winner is South Australia, which I have gotten many comments about how bad the energy crisis is in South Australia. They might, RE zealots have a hard time proving that wind and zealots. You say zealots, I say zealots. I say potato, you say potato. Thank you once again, Mari. It's a live show, folks. What do you do? All right. Meanwhile, back on Earth, a team from Chicago School of Economics have just proved the bleeding obvious. Here's what we found, and they list off this study here from April 22nd. Solar panels and wind turbines are making electricity significantly more expensive. A major new study by a team of economists from the University of Chicago finds. All right. So the reason I wanted to put this in tonight's broadcast in hopes that some of my friends on the other side see this article, and I've shared many links and papers to a friend of mine back from high school who believes in the CO2 theory at this time. And I think the reason why he believes in it so much is that the consensus is there, in his mind anyway, what he's been told all of his life. And so it's hard, just like most Americans, to disconnect from this theory of CO2 being the cause of warming. But I showed him the graph of where we have higher CO2 in the atmosphere right now at 412 parts per million. And we were at 402 parts per million in 2016. 2016, we peaked at a temperature of 0.88 above baseline, and that was in Celsius, 2016. Now, since 2016, the CO2 has risen by about 10 parts per million, so we're at 412 parts per million. So according to the CO2 theory, the higher the CO2, the warmer the temperatures. Except we are sitting at a 0.36 degrees above baseline, or it is 3.4. We actually are getting an update on this on Wednesday. May 1st is like our monthly Christmas present from Roy Spencer, where we follow and monitor the global temperatures and where they sit. But at the current time, I believe we're sitting at the 0.34 range. So we're about 0.52 degrees Celsius cooler than we were just 3 years ago. And that, folks, is significant. And on top of that, we had lower CO2 in the atmosphere. So I'm having trouble identifying with the reason why we see these carbon taxes and this attempt at solar and wind to be part of our infrastructure of power. If they want to tax you because they're trying to give us clean air and clean drinking water, that's one thing. But when they want to tax you and continue to tax you because they think that they're going to save your life by controlling our emissions, apparently the belief is that if we control our emissions, we can save ourselves from climate change. And that's just absurd. And you're getting lied to twice. False reasons for taxing any carbon or any fossil fuel, and just simply lying about the effects of carbon dioxide or CO2 to the atmosphere, to the temperature. It's all lies. They don't understand it. Even people on the right side of this still don't understand that humans don't affect climate change. Some of them believe that we affect it a little bit and that we should have stricter regulations, but not as bad as what the Green New Deal calls for. But even Republicans that are trying to say that man is causing any of this climate change is insane. They're not looking at scientific research. They're not looking at what's happened since 1995 with the cloud projects and everything. There's new research out there that reaffirms different theories. So what? There is a flaw in your theory, CO2. It seemed like it went hand in hand there for a minute. But I think the more research that comes to light, the more we're starting to realize, and especially solar and wind. Guys, I shared something on Twitter today that showed like 30,000 wind turbines in the UK produced 3.7 megawatts. Something insanely low. It's not enough, and it never will be. And surprisingly, to see some of these areas trying to shut down natural gas and coal, good luck when it gets really cold next winter. because by the looks of what's going on in Australia, boy, it is not going to be fun here in the Northern Hemisphere. And we saw tons of snow all over the Northern Hemisphere this year. Carbon taxes to blame for high gas and grocery prices. This is another story out of Canada. This is story headline number 3 for you guys. Gas prices are through the roof. Most Canadians are near bankruptcy, and we can't even afford our groceries. That is the daily reality Canadians have to deal with. Of course, the reality of ordinary Canadians is something that the entirety lost on the establishment liberals, who can't seem to fathom why people are upset by their snooty little fingers reaching further into our pockets. So it sounds like Canada has the same problem with liberals that we do. While the threat of recession looms, that's the one problem we don't have in the United States. Over our heads, we are supposed to kneel down and happily praise our overlords for their wise guardianship of our environment while we sink more money into government coffers. This is the same kind of emotion that you have to believe that you're hearing from people in France. The same conditions where people are having a hard time affording groceries. Fuel prices are soaring. I know in France they have a study out that shows that the majority of adults of the age of 38 and higher have had to resort into moving back in with their parents or family members. And, you know, I had a person tell me that, well, that happens here all the time. Well, that's not the point. There is a surge in this kind of situation in France that never was there before. Just like in this country, we went through that as well when we had the last administration in office and the economy wasn't doing so good. I'd like to say a lot of these kids nowadays are making enough money to live off of, but we are now starting to see the prices go up on food and fuel. Right now, gas prices are slightly up. I think the national average is over $2.75. People in California, if you want premium gas, you have to pay almost $5 a gallon. And I believe there is another increase in Canada, where now I think they're paying over $6 in gasoline prices for premium fuel. So, you know, we've got snow, we've got floods, and we've got high grocery prices and high gas prices. They have a recession looming around the corner. And listen, guys, it's already cold enough up there. So there is real concern right now for in these more northern regions of our world. And this is starting to get a little bit more serious, in my opinion, because the drumbeat is getting louder. First, this channel reports a lot on what happens in the United States, a couple of worldwide events that happen from time to time. But I have noticed an uptick of headline news for Canada with floods, record-breaking snow, and the cost of living, the carbon tax, how it's affecting the grocery prices. And this situation will only continue to get worse as we continue to see crop loss across the world now, not just in the United States, but across the world. So it's going to cost more money to import and export food. It's going to be, it could be slim pickings if the weather continues with this pattern that it's currently on. And before we head into our weather segment of our show tonight, Tom Harris, great guy here, he wrote a little article. President Donald Trump was right to ignore climate change in his April 22nd, 2019 Earth Day message. Instead, he focused on issues that actually matter, over which we have considerable control: protecting the nation's water infrastructure, conservation of land, water, and wildlife, improving forest health, and of course, economic prosperity, the linchpin on which all the rest is founded. After all, without prosperity, we cannot afford to protect the environment. Trump explained in his official Earth Day statement, environmental protection and economic prosperity go hand in hand. A strong market economy is essential to protecting our critical natural resources and fostering a legacy and conservation. He is correct, of course, but this did not go over well with concern about man-made climate. Bloomberg reported that Andrew Dessler, a climate scientist, Texas A&M University, explained the statement is really the antithesis of environmental protection. they are not mentioning the gravest existential threat to man-made climate change facing humanity. So the fact that Trump is ignoring the alarmism of man-made global warming, to me, this signifies, this is also a signal from this White House that we are going to see more. And you wait, after 2020, he wins. The Democrats are going to run on climate change. And I have a feeling that once Trump is reelected, that we're going to get more truthful and transparency reports on what's happening to the climate and what's happening around the world, not just in our region. And serious preparations will begin to take place at that point. And they're going to have to, if they haven't already started, which I think there's people in the know already that have the ball rolling. This is only a matter of time, I think, before you announce some type of crisis about food or crops or weather. You want to make sure that the evidence is firm and strong. And I think they're trying to wait as long as they can. But folks, I think we're running out of time to wait for that perfect moment to explain what's actually happening, because as I said earlier in the show, we are seeing the increase of these rain bombs, these cyclonic storms that hit an area over and over again, farmers losing their entire crop, records being broke of cold and snow. And really, the cold and snow records are falling a lot more than it's being reported as well. Especially with the length of time that some areas haven't seen a 60-degree temperature day. Some areas are still waiting to see that 60-degree mark, and they haven't seen it since October 2018. That's an impressive stretch of time without 60-degree temperatures, and that is exactly the type of thing that we're talking about when related to grand solar minimum conditions, where we have longer cold seasons and shorter grow seasons. We still get warm in the summertime, but it's not the same. And the deeper this minimum goes, the worse those conditions get. But I thought I'd share that with everybody. Trump, of course, he enjoys trolling the likes of Al Gore and others as well. Guys, stick around. We'll be right back with the weather part of our broadcast.
Do you like this show? Give us a thumbs up. Want to support us more? Share to your favorite social media platform. Buy a t-shirt or become a Patreon. All links are in the description below.